Hello and welcome to this week's video. This week I want to introduce to you a printmaking technique that you can easily use with materials that you already have. We'll be using watercolours and transferring them using a household medium onto a tile or a surface piece of glass would work as well, and then transferring these onto paper. Now they can be in their own right at the end of that process, works that work without adding any extra to them, but they also lend themselves to then further exploration of some of the watercolour techniques that we've looked at in other videos. So what I've got set up here is just a white tile. You could be using a piece of glass. What else could you use? Anything that's probably a smooth white surface, or a smooth surface really is probably just the prerequisite that the watercolour will sit on. I'm just using my normal watercolour palette here. I'll probably have to wash some of the colours away once we've finished with this exercise, just simply because of what we're doing here, but you know, just a normal watercolour palette of whatever shape or fashion, and just a few select colours. Now I'm particularly using colours that I know granulate, so they'll sit on the surface and do some interesting things, hopefully. Just some water, and what I've got in here is just dishwashing detergent, and this is what we're going to add to the paints as we're working. So what that's doing is it's changing the surface tension of the watercolour, and so that how it behaves out here on the tile is slightly different. It won't pull and do some of the things what it would normally do, like here. So you've got just that little bit more control. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to put some paint out. Now with this method you can be sort of in any direction that you want to take it. You can be quite abstracted, or stick with far more realist looking work or figurative work, whatever takes your fancy. So what we're going to do is, once you've got some colours out, so put a bit more of that Venetian red out. No, that's the dried up one. That's alright. We can live without. I'll just put a bit of red out. Is that we're going to mix with it just a little bit. So I'm just going to wet the brush so that it picks up the detergent. And it's a tiny bit. You don't need to add vast amount. So I'm just taking up a tiny bit and using that into the paint like that before we start to work. Now we can be, as I said, we can be working in quite a loose and abstract sort of way, maybe somewhat similar to what we've been looking at in terms of Turner. I'm not using too much water, so you can see that it actually means that you can paint quite and leave quite definite marks if you so choose. Rinse out that. Now as you're rinsing out your brush, of course, you're actually adding a little bit of detergent into the water, which is useful. It stops when you add maybe and water some of these colours down, it stops them from being too runny. I've forgotten what this colour is, it's rather nice. that in there. So just keep, as I said, you can be keeping it quite abstracted. And yet at the same time begin to have some sort of control. But it's to get that little bit of detergent into the mix, that's the key. It just lets you have that bit more control over what's going on here. We're going for sort of a bit of a Grampians type sort of feel with this. Paint's got a bit. So just remember, I mean, I'm using it here at the moment, it's quite wet and foamy actually, because of I haven't used a glue that was liquefied, and so you do need the watercolour to be liquid, so you've got to use it quite quickly. You can't be sort of picking up dried watercolour. Well, you can, it'll just give you only certain effects in terms of what we're doing here. And of course I'm doing something more landscapey in this case. It's up to you. Now you can be scratching and doing things into the surface like that. And the drier you use the paint, probably the better at this stage. This is through here is because there was too much foam in the paint, or not enough actual body, but look at what's happened, it's rather nice. We might just come in and introduce a little bit more like that. Now it's basically, it's just push it as far as you like. Be playing with experimenting with thinned colour, thicker colour, by adding less and more water. Could be playing all day. As I said, you can be lifting areas out too. So we can be taking something out. If we choose. And it lends itself to any type of subject matter too. Don't just stick with, I mean here that I've done a landscape, don't just stick that you think, oh, I've got to do landscapes. It could be any type of subject matter. The next aspect to this now is that you've just got to let it dry. Absolutely let it dry. So either putting it out in the sun, look, you could try with a hairdryer, but what you might find is that things start to move around if you're not careful, because unlike working on paper where the paper starts to grip and control things, this is just on a smooth surface, so it won't have sort of, it'll really spread and blend if you use that. So probably best just to let it dry naturally. Once this is dried, and I must point out that as it was drying, I came in with some more colour here in the foreground, some heavier blue, a little bit strengthened up the black on the trunk of that tree and a few other parts. And you could also still at this stage, now that it's absolutely completely dry, come in with a sharp implement and scratch or make some marks into that surface like that. If I want to, I'll just do something to, so we see. The next stage is pretty simple. Now I'm using some printmaking paper. You could use watercolour paper. Doesn't really matter what you use now. Just be aware that the more textured the paper is, so I'm using a printmaking paper that's relatively smooth. This is the Fabriano Rosa Spina. That if you use something like a watercolour paper that's quite textured, it might pick up the watercolour in a different way. So just be aware of that. What you need now is an atomizer. I've got this now down to quite a fine, misty spray. And what we want to do from quite a height, you want to come right up so that you don't get large globules of water over it. We want to just mist some colour over that. Now you don't want to go too much. If you go too much, which I think I may have, your colours will start to blend, and you can start to see there, that's probably a sign that I've gone too far. Give that just a couple of minutes for the water to reactivate the watercolour on there, and then it's just a matter of laying the paper down onto this. Just give it a gentle rub around. If you've had a barren, a hand barren, that would be probably even better. You can take a sneak peek to see what's going on and whether you need to rub it anymore, but I don't think I'm going to. And then lift. And there we are. Ooh. Too much water. Sprayed a little bit too much water. But there's some nice things happening there. You can see areas where I maybe haven't touched as much. Sometimes now, when it's got to this kind of stage and it's maybe you've totally lost it and it's not working, and it could be along the lines of, you know, that last one, I just don't think the image is working, is either just to clean it right off, or that you can then just go maybe a little bit wild, and this is maybe where we'll just add in some water and a bit more colour, and maybe go with something then far more abstract. Now the way to get it even more abstract and more flowing is that then we can start to maybe manipulate the water on the surface like that. And there's enough detergent in that this will transfer really, really well. So we'll just then take another print off what's there. You're going to have water go everywhere. Now what's going to happen is, because there is a lot more water, this will be a lot more smoothed out. You don't really want to move like I just did. And that's where you'll start to get some interesting ones like this. And that's far more interesting, I think. Normally what you can do is just pull a little bit of that colour around, touch up those edges. But best to leave it. You can actually see where I've been rubbing. Might just do one more. Now what you'll find is these are very gentle and getting very, very faded. So what you can do is then start to maybe drop in some areas of stronger colour, like that. And last but not least, nice one. So here you can see them completely dry now, and they're pretty exciting when you look at them like this, I think.
You can see these ones are done on the Fabriano Rosa Spina, so the printmaking paper. And that lends itself to, you know, these lovely soft looking effects. And whether they work or not, and as I said, that one I wasn't particularly happy with. The interesting thing with these is, though, if you've done them on good quality papers, like in the watercolour videos that we've looked at, is that you can sometimes reactivate and change some of the surfaces by adding water. So I mean, here you can see this area here, if I start to get in there with some of the water, and this is just the water, is that I'm starting to activate the colour. And this is starting to get maybe a bit more happening again. You don't have to be doing whole sections like that, even just to start doing a section like that. Is quite interesting. Even more so is if you have done them on, that's another one on the Fabriano Rosa Spina that I showed you. What's more exciting is if you have done some of these on, and these are ones that I've done on watercolour paper. And that then probably allows you to play even more with some of those lifting and drying, taking colour out techniques, adding colour in. And these can sometimes mean these are the lovely basis or the beginnings of some fantastic landscapes or imaginative landscapes. And there's one here, another one there, that could be wonderful beginnings of something further creative.
So, have a play. I don't think necessarily any of the plays that I've had here are particularly successful when I've added more painting, but it doesn't matter whether they're successful or not. I mean, it's a pity if you've, you know, wrecked maybe a beginning that you were particularly happy with, but as I said, it doesn't really matter. It's often that there's maybe sections then that you can build upon, putting frames over bits and thinking, there's a possibility there that leads off into another composition. It's really just to let go and see what happens, rather than with that idea of having a set goal in mind. It's to really just let your creativity take it where you go. Good luck. Have fun. Enjoy the process. And I shall speak to you soon.